So, you want to get into sim racing? If you've done the rounds on YouTube, you've no doubt seen at least a few people driving with very expensive looking dedicated rigs, with 25 million Newton meter direct drive wheelbases, triple screens and VR, driven by RTX 4090 graphics cards. When you're looking at a hobby like this through the distorted lens of an influencer that had half of their gear given to them by sponsors, you might start thinking that this whole thing looks too expensive, which can cause you to feel like quitting before you even get started. But fear not, it doesn't have to be that way. All you need to get started on your sim racing journey is either a last gen or current gen console, such as an Xbox One or Xbox Series, PS4 or PS5. Or, if you're in the PC space, if you have a mid-range or even budget gaming rig from the past 5 or 6 years, and a controller with analog triggers, you can start sim racing today. The thing is, some games provide a much better controller experience than others, so I have a few games in mind that not only play well with joysticks and triggers, but are ideal places to start for other reasons too. I also have some other pointers to share as well, so be sure to watch till the end for those. For my first game recommendation, if you're on PlayStation, you have access to what I think is a genuinely great entry point for sim racing, Gran Turismo 7.
A bad driver, that's a simcade at best.
As vague and as subjective as terms like arcade, simcade, and simulation can be, I would actually agree that Gran Turismo is probably a simcade, but that's one of the major reasons that it's such a good place to start. To clarify, I would consider the actual driving and car behaviour of Gran Turismo 7 to be somewhere within the simulation bracket, but I think that the game's structure is a bit more arcade-leaning than what you're going to experience in most full-blown simulators, and I think that really helps to ease newcomers into the experience. Speaking of easing in newcomers, GT7's license system is a great way to learn the ropes if you don't know how to drive quickly. For the uninitiated among you, Gran Turismo's licenses are a series of driving tests that, once completed, grant you access to more races and cars, as well as some credit rewards to sweeten the deal along the way. What makes them so helpful for newcomers is that the game clearly explains and demonstrates the driving techniques and car behaviour principles that it's testing you on. So if you pay attention and make an effort to use what you learn in your races, you can improve a lot here. The other thing that sets GT7 apart, at least for the PS5 version, is that the controller experience is second to none for a racing game. The PS5 controller's features are utilised really well. The haptics provide surprisingly detailed feedback, the active triggers make threshold braking way more feasible than it is on other controllers I've experienced, and you can even use gyro steer, which I think is at least worth trying. I think it's actually quite good with older, slower cars. GT7 certainly isn't perfect. I think the cafe career mode feels a bit too linear for much of the journey, the roulette ticket system is insultingly bad, and since most of the single player racing doesn't utilise the new Sophie AI system, you'll spend most of your time starting at the back and overtaking cars that are driving really slowly, which I wouldn't consider to be proper racing. But flaws aside, there's still so much you can experience here, including PSVR 2 support, that I think it's one of the best places to begin. Now, if you're on PC, which is definitely the sim racing mecca, you certainly have a wealth of options to choose from, and I think Automobilista 2 is one of the best places to begin for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's one of those rare titles that not only is one of the better looking games in the genre, but it's also very well optimised. Even if you're on a more budget or mid-range machine, you'll be able to tune the visuals to pump out healthy frame rates. The base game has a good variety of race cars to choose from, and the DLC can be bought in a bundle on Steam, which includes everything, making it an economical choice, particularly on sale. One of Automobilista 2's strongest features, which I think is great for beginners, is the AI racing experience. AI is pretty difficult to get right for racing simulators. Compared to other human drivers, they will often be too passive and polite, never trying to make risky moves on you. Or they'll be too consistent and never make mistakes, giving them an uncanny robotic precision without any of the ebb and flow you'd get from a real person. They can also be very wildly inconsistent between different cars and tracks. I'm not saying that they're perfect here, but it's one of the better AI implementations that I've experienced, and they will regularly provide you with fun, engaging races. To tell the truth, since getting into iRacing, I don't really do AI races much anymore, but I did quite a bit when I was new, and I think that was because it was a convenient, safe way to build some basic skills and confidence before I started racing other people. But even if you prefer competitive multiplayer, it's still useful if you want to race a car and track combination that simply isn't popular enough for you to find multiplayer races in. I think that utility alone makes AMS2 worth having, and a pretty ideal starting place if you're new. As for my ex-bros, don't worry, you're not forgotten. This last pick is available for everyone on Xbox, PlayStation and PC. It's my most played racing game of all time, so I can't really go past it. Dirt Rally 2.0. This game is getting a little long in the tooth now at 5.5 years old, but that comes with some direct benefits. It's available on both last gen and current gen consoles, and for PC it doesn't require a supercomputer to run, though when you crank it up it still looks really nice. You can also pick it up on sale very cheaply. I highly recommend the Game of the Year version, which more than doubles the number of rally locations over the base game, and significantly expands the car roster too. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the rally driving style. The variety of the roads and the driving conditions keeps things feeling fresh and exciting for me, so it's a fun way to complement your circuit driving if that's what you primarily do. One other aspect of rallying that makes it a great choice for beginners is that the competitive multiplayer scene is very accessible and approachable. Unlike circuit racing, in rallying you are essentially driving in isolation. Nobody can ruin or interfere with your race, and you can't ruin or interfere with theirs. It's just you, the car, the stage and the pace notes. Do your best and you'll find out how you measured up at the end. The other major benefit here is that you don't need to be online at the exact same time as your competitors. Multiplayer events will usually have at least a 24-hour window for you to complete them, and you don't need to worry about the latency of your connection either, so you can enjoy racing other players at your convenience no matter where you're from. Just to briefly touch on the topic of peripherals, some folks will recommend beginners to buy a used wheel and then simply sell it on for what they paid if they want to upgrade or they decide that sim racing isn't for them. That is good advice, but I think it's worth getting in some controller time in first, because the type of racing that you want to do can dictate what wheel you should actually buy. For example, one of the most common beginner sets on the market is the Logitech G29 or G920. It's regarded as a pretty reliable set, and there's plenty around on the used market, so it's a pretty low-risk purchase. While it will be perfectly adequate for a beginner's circuit racing ventures, I wouldn't recommend it as a first choice if you're into rallying, and especially if you're into drifting. There's two reasons for this. Firstly, the G29 uses a fairly modest gear drive, so the force feedback's maximum rotation speed is quite slow compared to a real car. For drifting in particular, this means that you'll need to manually throw the wheel for it to keep up with your transitions, whereas a good belt or direct drive allows you to simply release the wheel and let it do the work for you. The other problem is the D-shaped rim, which makes these high rotation driving styles a bit awkward. Rally and drift cars use round steering wheels for a reason. Don't get me wrong, you can rally and drift with the G29, but it will be more difficult than it needs to be and a lot less satisfying. So with those considerations in mind, if rallying or drifting is what you're about, you might be better off springing for something like the Thrustmaster T300, or if you can stretch for it, an entry-level direct drive. There's plenty to choose from nowadays. To wrap things up, my last bit of advice is to start off in your comfort zone, but don't be afraid to leave it. There's nothing wrong with finding your feet when using driving assists or racing against lower difficulty AI opponents. Just don't forget to tighten the screws every once in a while so that you continue growing. As an example of this, I think it's very common that beginners will default to the chase camera when they get started with sim racing. I certainly did, but don't be afraid to try the cockpit out. I've made a couple of videos about this topic, diving in depth to the benefits of the cockpit camera, so check those out if you're interested. And when you do eventually get the itch to graduate to a wheel, I have a video about my experiences with that as well. So, if you've been umming and eyeing about diving into sim racing, I hope this gives you some direction. Just jump in there and get into it. Seize the day by playing video games at home. For those of you who are more seasoned, I'm curious to know where you started with sim racing. Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more inconsequential rambling. Until next time, protect your neck and diversify your bonds. You know, for the children.